Hey everybody, welcome to week 2. This is the lecture on chapter 2 after the ball. So we're talking about the 19th and 20th century, the early 20th century in this chapter. Minstrel shows. This is a huge part. It takes up a whole big chunk of the chapter, in the beginning especially. And it's kind of difficult to read some of this, right? But hang in there. It's important to know this and to kind of know the truth about what was happening. So this is maybe one of the hardest parts. Is this was the first form of music and theatrical entertainment that was regarded as distinctly American by European audiences. So prior to this, people we were mostly associated with our European counterparts, and this was some of our first very humble and dubious beginnings into American popular music. So there's some discussion about some individuals that are involved in this medium, minstrel shows, and their demographic, where they were coming from, and some history on the subject. So make sure you check that out. All right, so I want to move forward to Stephen Foster. This is a composer of a bunch of songs that you've heard, including stuff like "Oh Susanna," "Camptown Races," "Doo-Dah, Doo-Dah," right? So this was one of the very first, possibly the first individual to make his entire living off of professional songwriting. So prior to that, I mean, it's theatrical performances and songwriting performances probably wouldn't have cut the mustard when it came to make a living. So very interesting there. And his songs obviously live on today. This is the beginning of copyright law. So Foster is directly engaged with the very beginning of copyright law, and understand that that's a part of the music business discussion that's sort of woven into our topics in American popular music, which are technical aspects of American popular music, historical aspects like who, what, when, where, and why, as well as music business. So when we're taking a look at this is a really important element of this right here, this AABA melodic structure. So AABA, if we're looking at the very, very basic elements of a melodic line, so if you have "Oh Susanna, won't you cry for me," you have an upward ending phrase and a downward ending phrase, right? So question and answer. So think about, as you're reading the chapter, how does that tie in to what this AABA melodic structure is? What are they referring to? And try to hear. A is obviously repeated, B is something new, and then A is repeated again. So you're looking for melodies, so the notes that are sung and how they are in relation to each other. Make sure you understand what an arrangement is. We're going to talk about key terms at the end of this lecture. So I'm going to jump over dance music and brass bands. This is something that we're going to talk about more in the future when we talk about John Philip Sousa here in a moment. The waltz is a really important musical form to understand. So it's characterized by 3/4. 3/4 means there's 3 quarter notes or 3 beats per measure. So it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 2 dun 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 dun. So if you think about a waltz, believe it or not, there's actually a lot of music right now that's in 3/4 that you've listened to in your lifetime. Not as much as 4/4, but a lot. So this is the engagement of the audience in dancing with music, and the number of beats and the way that you engage with the beats has a lot to do from the get-go. Okay, so dancing was divided up a lot based upon socioeconomic status, and that's something that's discussed in this chapter as well. So as we get into the brass bands, military bands, originally bands and snare drums and military marches, it was something that was intended to both uplift the troops as well as potentially scare the enemy. Think of Lord of the Rings or whatnot. So when you're hearing some of the Civil War music from American popular music, think about how its role might have been playing, or what role it might have played in a soldier march or in uplifting folks at home that were taking care of wounded soldiers and whatnot, and how the music had drew into nationalism and drew into identity during that period of time. John Philip Sousa, so a pretty big character here in American music. Just about every song you've ever heard with a brass band during the 4th of July is probably written by John Philip Sousa. So really unique ways of using the instruments, very sort of almost involuntary or mimicking cannon fire when you're hearing this. Really interesting period of concert band part writing that John Philip Sousa was involved with. So I'm going to jump forward to Tin Pan Alley. This is a really important aspect of this chapter. So Tin Pan Alley is an important part. There's song plungers, there's song pluggers, there's the sheet music outlets, the mail order houses. You can start to see the music business and the way that music was being traded, copied, played, and then performed, and that entire network taking place. Vaudeville is basically an offshoot of the minstrel shows. It's something that coalesced from the minstrel shows. It has some dubious honors of its own, and an element of vaudeville exists today in sort of a nostalgic way in the popular bar scenes and elsewhere. So some big names in Tin Pan Alley. We're going to jump forward to the end of this to ragtime, because this is a really important genre to take on. So ragtime, Scott Joplin, the entertainer. If you had a Nokia cell phone in 1999, it rang. So ragtime is basically, an American musical form that finally showcased African American performers and gave credit where credit was due, including Scott Joplin, who was someone who was principally credited with having basically invented this genre. And it's a really, you got to think this form of music was so popular and it spread around the country so fast. It would have been similar to any very popular technical development that we have today. And one of the main ways that it spread around the country is using the phonograph. So this is the period where the phonograph or the record player first emerges. And if you go on YouTube, you can listen to the first phonograph or record player recording, and it's going to sound like a bunch of fuzz and some humming. But Nickelodeons, which you and I grew up maybe watching Nickelodeon channel, this is actually the term for a jukebox from that period of time. It's kind of interesting little fact there. So key terms. Always make sure you're paying attention to two aspects at the end of the chapter. One, the chronology that ties in the songs with the American history that's happening at the time. So the chronology of American history and the songs that comport with each one of those. Two, you have the key terms. These are the terms that are oftentimes going to be described in the quiz. These are also the elements of the chapter that you're going to want to be able to understand and carry forward to your next chapter. Arrangement, ragtime, syncopation, so the offbeats, right? Make sure you understand that concept. Tin Pan Alley, the waltz, and so on. So take this chapter in. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you, and make sure you get your quiz done. And the class will be moving on to the next assignments pretty soon, but this is a fun chapter. All right, take care.